Good morning, folks. I decided to sit outside this morning because it's such a beautiful spring morning, and the birds in the background are, I don't know if you guys can hear them, but they're just very pretty. Anyway, I have two books that I have published so far. The first one is Aimless Memoirs of a Life in Transition, and the second one is Shadows of Fire Memoirs of a Life in Transition. Both of these books are available online with most online booksellers. I haven't done a live reading in a while, so I've been seeing some things coming through my feed that there's some kind of book talk thing going on where about transgender books right now because of all the um, political stuff that's going on. So anyway, I thought I'd read from my books. If I'm just going to start with this is a fictionalized memoir. Uh, so most of what is in these books actually really happened, but I changed the names for people's privacy and stuff. Um, so Aimless is about, hey, Rich, good morning. Hey, give me a page number, Rich. Give me a page number. Flip anywhere between 100 and 300. Give me a page number, and then I can start reading from that page number. Oh, do you want to join my live, Rich? We could talk about some of this stuff together. Let's see here. I don't know if it'll let me. I pushed the button, but I don't know if it'll let me. All right, so anyway, I'm just going to flip to a page. Kat was having trouble reading. She would read her books for school, but nothing was sinking in. Mama thought perhaps it was a reading comprehension problem, so Kat began reading homework out aloud to Mama. In doing this, they discovered that it was not her reading comprehension, but rather her eyesight, and Mama decided that Kat would have to make an appointment to visit an eye doctor. Kat took herself to the appointment after school. It turned out that she needed glasses for reading. Being on welfare, she was given 3 or 4 frames to choose from. All of them were ugly to her. She didn't like her glasses and was not consistent about wearing them. When she had once no problem letting hours slip by with her nose deeply planted in a book, now she was hesitant to even try. The glasses made her feel ugly and awkward. She often stuffed them in her pocket or let them get lost at the bottom of her bag. Spring in school meant time for exams. Mama reminded Kat she ought to go into the regular doctor for a checkup. Again, Kat had to make her own appointment. She took herself to the doctor alone after school. This time it was not as simple as getting glasses. She didn't realize that going in for a checkup be would be a well woman examination. The doctor was not gentle with the girl. Kat lay on the cold table. The doctor asked her questions while she examined the girl. Are you sexually active? The girl responded, yes. While staring at the ceiling, she pinched her eyes shut tight and prayed for the exam to be over. The metal speculum was cold and pinched inside her. Tears welled up in her eyes and she whimpered. The doctor scraped something along the inside of the girl while brashly commenting, if you are sexually active, then you should be used to this. The girl winced again, half whispering, it hurts. The doctor continued, it doesn't really hurt that much. You'll be fine. Kat held her breath, tense from head to toe. The doctor removed the speculum and Kat let the breath out, trying to relax. Then the doctor jammed her fingers inside the girl to feel around, and Kat held her breath again. The girl was angry. She had been drunk or pretty high pretty much every time she had had sex with a guy. She never really enjoyed it that much. But she had little feeling of discomfort. This poking, prodding, and jamming was so intrusive, and the doctors did little to comfort her. I like sex with my girlfriend. It never hurts like this. She felt violated. She tried not to speak and prayed for the exam to be over quickly. I'm never going back to a doctor like that again. I can't understand what you're saying, Matthew Official Zero. I apologize. All right. You guys want to give me a page number? I'll flip to that page. I'm in book 1. This is Aimless, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. It's based on my childhood. I am transgender. I was assigned female at birth, I believe incorrectly. I didn't realize that I was transgender until after I'd been married twice and had 2 children. My children grew up. They're both adults now. And I have a very good relationship with my children. It took me 7 years to get the first book published, and then another year before I had the second book published. And if you would like, give me a page number, and I'll just flip to that page and start reading. You can get a little sample of what I've written. Let's see here. Page 234. Since nobody's giving me a page, I flip to page 234. Kat had been traipsing around town in an old hand-me-down beaver coat. The costume beneath the coat was minimal and was meant to resemble some perverse adult version of a cat. Freezing in melancholy, she managed a ride home with friends who were intoxicated and ready to call it a night. Waking up with a hangover from lack of good sleep and nourishment, shivering, sleeping curled in a ball with only the coat as a blanket, had not been sufficient. I thought fur coats were supposed to be warm. She found herself apologizing as bumming normal clothes to wear became important. She received a severe lecture on the travesty of the fur industry and subsequently forgot to bring the beaver coat when she left. She felt guilty for losing it, and she felt guilty for having it. I can't win. She made her way back to town. By the weekend, Kat was ready for some good, solid friend time. Kat missed the times she had hung out with Cole and Richard and the other guys the previous year. She had felt like just one of the guys. Everything had felt normal while Will was gone. Comparatively, she missed that feeling of normal friendship without such a heavy emphasis on partying. When Kat ran into Richard, she tried to talk to him about it. They used to talk on the phone about everything and nothing. They had gotten really close. Now he seemed to be willing to talk again. She relished the opportunity, and they spent the better part of the afternoon hitchhiking up to Compshe. When the 2 friends reached Richard's house, Kat used the phone to call Mama and check in. Feeling better from her talk with Richard, she was brave enough to actually try and talk to her mother. I guess it's important to at least check in sometimes. Kat's phone call was not well received. Her mother was not appreciative. Mama got very angry with her on the phone, insisting that Kat come home right away. I'm stressed out. You need to come home and watch your brother so Will and I can go to the hot tubs. Impossible. Even if I were driving, it would take at least an hour. Kat tried to explain that she didn't have a ride. It's getting dark, and hitchhiking out there after dark is practically impossible. Mama got angrier. If you're not going to be coming home tonight, don't bother coming home at all. Kat took it as an ultimatum. Distraught and glad to be in a place that she felt safe, she allowed herself to enjoy the evening hanging out with Richard and his mom. She briefly shared her misery regarding her current relationship with her mother. Richard's mom was very nice. You are always welcome here, even if Richard isn't around. Kat spent the rest of the weekend visiting with Richard and his mom. They rode the school bus back into town on Monday morning. That day she went to school and searched for a solution. She spent time with friends that had time for her. She walked around the streets of Mendocino for hours, racking her brain for the right answer. She decided that it was just getting too cold to be on the streets. I can't keep up with school without the stability of a regular place to go back to. It's just not working. Kat felt trapped. She walked out of town to the highway mid-afternoon. Mesmerized, she stared at the waves of ocean crashing against the sand, constantly recreating the shape of the ocean. I wonder what it must feel like to know your purpose. What is it supposed to feel like when you know exactly what you are supposed to do and can find peace in that repetition? There was something mystical and free about the coastline. She felt strong emotions pulling her south down the coastline. Walking with her thumb out, she was quick to get a ride. It was the head teacher of her school. Kat was afraid to ask him for a ride all the way home, even though she suspected he would say yes if she asked. She didn't want him to come in and talk to Mama. She didn't want him to judge her for her decisions. She just wanted him to support her. I'm leaving. I have tried to keep going to school, but it's all too much. She told him that she was going home to pack her bag for the road, and then she would be heading south. Instead of telling her all the reasons why it was a bad idea, he responded gently. I'm heading to Santa Rosa for evening classes at college, he said as he dropped her off at the bottom of her ridge. You just be careful. He urged Kat to seek her own that dropped her at the driveway. Walking up the driveway, Kat was quiet and cautious. She wanted to make sure she wasn't seen. She had no patience for confrontation. Slipping into her room, she repeated the ritual of dumping her bag out. This time she repacked for a long haul. She chose basics that were easy to layer: some crystals, notebooks, pens, colored pencils, a couple of Sharpies, and a shaggy hardbound copy of the complete works of Shakespeare. Some people carry a Bible, and I've got Shakespeare. Laughing at herself, Kat dubbed it her Bible. She put her grandfather's long overcoat on and tucked her little sheathed dagger into the inside breast pocket. Hopefully I won't need to use it, but just in case I run into trouble, I could do some damage with this little double-edged blade. And perhaps reading Shakespeare will help me find some great hidden meaning that will enlighten me. With a patchwork backpack, bedroll, and her little army green knapsack, Kat half ran down the driveway and out of sight. Back to the road, she walked west for a couple of miles before she was able to get another lift. A couple of drivers later, she found herself getting dropped off in Boonville after dark. I will be waiting here for a very long time, especially after dark. If it's not a straight shot all the way to Cloverdale, I'm pretty much screwed until morning. Cold and hungry, she sat on her bags. So, I'm reading from Aimless, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. This is book 1 of my fictionalized memoirs. I published this at the beginning of the pandemic. My timing wasn't great. But I was so excited about getting my book published because I'd been working on it for 7 years. And it was a great accomplishment for me. It is a great accomplishment for me. I hope that sharing my story with people will help them to feel like they're not alone. And you know, it was really hard for me to figure out that I was transgender. I didn't figure it out until I was 35 years old. So my fictionalized memoirs are more about what dysphoria looks like than it is about the transition process. And I really feel like that's relevant right now because of all the legislation that is going up in so many states across the country, and there's so many transgender folks that are really frightened about the potential of having to detransition or of their children potentially not being allowed to get gender affirming care. What living with dysphoria? I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, Andrew Jimenez. I don't know who. Um, so what what dysphoria looks like when you're not receiving gender affirming care becomes very relevant for a lot of people that want to understand. Um, it it's like walking around. I don't know. This is way too simplified, but it's like being confused all the time, but not knowing why you're confused or what you're confused about. But everything, the feeling of being confused. If you can imagine, like, if you're in a situation that doesn't make sense or somebody says something that doesn't make sense, or you come in the middle of a conversation and you don't have all the pieces and you're confused. That feeling of confusion. I think everyone has experienced a feeling of confusion before. So if you, for just a moment, you can try to remember a time when you were really confused. And at that moment, really nothing made sense. Even things that should make sense didn't make sense because there was somehow a piece missing, right? But once things were clarified, you weren't confused anymore, right? Well, if you can try to imagine feeling that way all the time, regardless of whether or not things are logical, you can kind of muddle through the logic of, how to do basic things in life, how to function or conduct yourself with other people, or go to work or school or whatever. But you always feel confused and you don't know why, and there is no point of clarity. That is the most dumbed down, basic, vanillified version of dysphoria that I can possibly think of, but it's way more complex than that. So, book one starts when I'm in fourth grade. Going through puberty, while experiencing gender dysphoria, was challenging enough, but I didn't know that I was experiencing gender dysphoria. Neither did my parents. Neither did my counselor. If she did, she never brought it up with my parents. I've been in counseling off and on since I was 7 years old. First counselor recognized that I was experiencing gender dysphoria. And this is what she did. The counselor assured Kat that she would start to feel more like a girl when her body started changing from a kid to a grown-up. She said that in the meantime, it was perfectly fine to do all the boy things. Just don't be surprised when you find yourself caring what boys think. Kat responded smartly, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just like them. And if they don't know it, they're just stupid. The counselor corrected the child. Well, no, honey, you are not just like them. You don't have a penis like this. See? She pointed to a picture in a book. She turned the pages, settling on a photograph that showed a clear picture of a woman's genitals. This is what your private parts will look like when you grow up. See? No penis. But it's okay. It's supposed to be this way. She then proceeded to spend the next 2 years putting me through conversion therapy without telling my parents. This book starts when I'm in fourth grade because that's when puberty really started to kick in. And going through conversion therapy before puberty made puberty that much more confusing. I never received gender affirming care. My parents were never notified that that's what was going on in counseling. They thought that I was getting counseling for being a child of parents that are divorced. Right. So I grew up with that damage. I never got care for that damage until I realized I was transgender. But that was when I was 35 years old. And at that point, I'd already been married twice and had 2 children. So it did a lot of damage in my life. And I've spent a lot of time trying to heal from that. And I gotta say, the stuff that's going on now in our country is pretty terrifying for me because now that I've unmasked and learned who I really am, I don't think I could ever go back. I mean, I don't have breasts anymore. I don't look like I can't I can't act. I'm already legally changed everything except for my birth certificate. And I wasn't going to change my birth certificate because I wanted the family history to be correct and accurate in case children in future generations in my family wanted to look up genealogy records. I wanted them to be able to see in the records that there was a transgender person in the family history, that I was assigned female at birth and that I transitioned to male. I didn't want those records to disappear because I felt like it was important. Now I'm afraid because my birth certificate says that I'm female. Anyway, I want to go back to reading. So, again, this is book one, Aimless Memoirs of a Life in Transition. This starts from fourth grade, and it goes until about age 18, 18, 19, somewhere around that. Then Shadows of Fire picks up, and that's for the next couple years. Shadows of Fire actually covers a period of my life when my first child was born. And that was a very interesting experience for a transgender person in retrospect. It really helps me to understand why childbirth was so incredibly terrifying for me. Um, uh, it was a blessing to have my children and to not figure out that I was transgender until after I'd had my children. That was a blessing because otherwise I wouldn't have my children. Um, but childbirth was terrifying. I really thought I was going to die. If my dad hadn't been there holding my hand, helping me through the process, I really believed I was going to die. That was the most terrifying experience for me that I've ever experienced in my life so far. And I have the utmost respect for all cisgendered women and non cisgendered people that carry children and give birth to children. Um, that wow, it's an amazing thing, and it was terrifying for me. However, my children are a blessing. So anyway, the experience of my first child is in there too. Again, these books are fictionalized memoirs based on my own life, and its focus. It tells the story of the dysphoria before transition. Um, I am working on book three, and I think by the end of book three, or somewhere near the end of book three, I'll get to the point in the timeline where I figure out I'm transgender, but that's going to be towards the end of the series. I'm not sure if I'll actually write a book based on the transitioning process itself, because to me, writing the books was the transitioning process. Like the years that I spent writing the books are the years that I spent in transition. And transition, my process of transition required me to really comb through all of my memories in my timeline to re-examine and reprocess everything I'd experienced so that I could better understand myself. And so the books are a product of the transition. And I really hope they help people understand what dysphoria looks like. So I just opened up to page 40. No, this isn't page 40. Page 130. Rabbit looked up to see Doug turning the corner that spilled into the town square before her. Sitting on the lawn in the mouth of the park provided for a broad view of three different streets that fed into the town square. The little courtyard in the center completed the picture-perfect setting. Rabbit sighed. Of course he's coming back. I told you everything is going to be great. Doug arrived at their blanket accompanied by a few new friends. Introductions were shared all around as they made themselves comfortable. Their seating positions created a circle of which Rabbit seemed just a little removed from. Her presence next to Doug anchored her to the group while enforcing the image of his ownership of her. Sitting on the blanket with the rest of their stuff, Doug briefly presented his girlfriend as if she had been the culmination of an abbreviated tour of the house. This is from Book 2, Shadows of Fire. Um, let's see here. Anyway, if you guys are interested in either of these books, um, book one, Aimless, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. Book two, Shadows of Fire, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. My name is Charles Firecap Burnell, and they're both available online with most online booksellers. Barnes& and Noble online. Of course, Amazon. I don't always encourage everyone to do Amazon, but if you like to do that, go for it. That's you. I like to support Barnes& and Noble because they still have brick and mortars, but there are other discount booksellers online where you can probably find it cheaper for the than the list price at this point, because they've already bought the books and they've listed them for resale. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this for now because it doesn't really seem to be all that active this morning. Oh, I've got somebody new. Sylvia, you want to give me a page number? I've got Aimless, book one or book two. If you want to give me a page number, I'll flip to it and start reading. Good morning, folks. I was going to go, but people came back in. Give me a page number. Let's see. I just flipped to 259. As the new year progressed, Kat began using powders again. Going home to an empty apartment was lonely and depressing. With money in her pocket, she began going to the Ave after work, looking for other people to hang out with. Falling back into the habit of using powders and drinking was easier with a source of income. In the past, it had been a challenge to come up with intoxicants. Now she was able to pay for them, and people wanted to hang out with her for the party. She felt wanted. She felt sexy. Kat often tried to get someone to come home with her. She didn't want to make the trek across town alone. She didn't want to sleep alone. She didn't want to be alone. This often ended up with her late, wasted, and having sex until wee hours of the morning, and then it was time for her to go to work. She kicked out whomever had kept her company the night before. The rate with which she was consuming intoxicants increased too fast. She was quickly back to the same place of insobriety that she had been the previous summer. Late in January, after a week straight binge on powders, Kat finally came down. She came down so hard that she slept for a whole day, and when she awoke, she was very sick. She got up just long enough to go to the bathroom, and promptly she returned her hot, achy body back to the bed, tossing and turning, her body choked in tangled, sweaty blankets. Mike began to get concerned about her. His blurry face appeared, forcing tea and water into her. Her throat swollen almost entirely shut, she could not speak. She gasped for air. Delirious, she sobbed, choking on her tears. Tossing and turning, hallucinations swarmed around her. Placing damp towels on her forehead, Mike tried to cool her down. Still, her fever persisted. Peeling off her sweaty clothes, he covered her with wet towels. Taking her temperature, his fear shone through the haze like a piercing light in the darkness of her fever. Her scalding tears frightened him. He poured her into the shower, trying desperately to bring down the 104-degree fever. Cursing him as the cold water cut into her, a million knives escalated the pain that shot through her body. Holding her in his arms like a baby, Mike carried Kat from the bathroom to her bedroom. Laying her quaking, wet body back in her bed, he covered her with more damp towels. It had been almost 48 hours without relief from the high fever. Kat could hear his voice in the distance, telling someone that her fever had not dropped below 103 for 2 days. She felt like she was drowning in lava. Again, I'm reading from Aimless, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. This is my first book of fictionalized memoirs. As a transgender person living with dysphoria, I didn't realize I was transgender until I was 35. I'd already been married twice and had 2 children. So, my books are based on pre-transition me, um, the life that I experienced before I figured out what was going on and what dysphoria looks like as a young person who doesn't have a point of reference, who doesn't know that that's what they're experiencing. It still affects you even when you don't know that you're experiencing it. Book two is Shadows of Fire, Memoirs of a Life in Transition. Um, both of these books are available online with all online booksellers, pretty much. You can get them with Amazon or Barnes& and Noble. Um, Let's see. Oh, there's a cat. There's a cat. Oh, there's the cat. Ruthie, hang out with us. All right. From Shadows of Fire. Well, my live keeps going in and out, so I'm not going to read next from anything. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I'll talk to you later.